All right, we've covered a lot of ground on this previously, and I had some fluff here at the beginning, but I'm going to fast forward through some of it. However, I will mention yesterday was April 18th, and April 18th is significant in the history of World War II for two dates that I'm aware of. One, obviously, is that yesterday was the 75th anniversary of the Jimmy Doolittle raid, which is a remarkable feat in aviation history. And 1 year later to the day was, of course, if you saw my presentation last year on the shooting down of Admiral Yamamoto. That was also April 18th. It was 1 year later when a bunch of guys in the P-38 Lightnings flew a very long distance with nothing but a compass and a wristwatch to catch up with this guy and not just find him on the ground somewhere, but intercept his airplane, and they successfully shot that down. And if you want to think of that in terms of history that you can relate to, it was probably the equivalent of losing or taking out of the war someone like Dwight Eisenhower or Douglas MacArthur. So anyway, that was yesterday in history that these guys did this. Dead Reckoning Navigation is what they used to get there, and Dead Reckoning Navigation is kind of what we're celebrating with the Navigation Challenge that we're going to be putting on May 13th. We did it last fall and had a lot of fun with it. Hoping to see a good turnout again this year. It is basically getting back to our roots and flying, going out and flying, and doing it without the aid of GPS or electronic navigation. Basically, compass, clock, and a little bit of pilotage. And of course, that's how we all got started. Most of us got started anyway in aviation. I know I did. Obviously, during my career in aviation, the VOR was king, and a lot of navigation was going from one VOR to another. But tonight, I want to sort of take you back to the experience we had last fall with the Navigation Challenge and show you how it was planned and how it was executed and what the route was and how it worked. Those of you who participated, this will look a little bit familiar, but I'm kind of banking on the fact that it all happened kind of quickly, so you might want to have a look at really what happened. And those of you who weren't here might find this interesting, and I hope challenge you to come and join us on May 13th. That was fast forward, so I got to try and catch up with where I was here. On your table, you will find the top secret mission briefing kit that was handed out. Go ahead and open those up at this time. This is what we gave to the pilots who were participating in our challenge last October. And of course, like any mission briefing, it was top secret until the day of the briefing. Now, in that kit, you will find the map that we used, which I'm showing on screen here. It's the glossy folded piece. You'll find something, a couple of pages that show arrival and departure procedures. You'll find an item called the 128-second turn. And you'll find a couple of navigation logs. These are the items that we handed out to the pilots who participated in the challenge in October. So first off, let's take a look at the map. Now, the mission is to fly to a specific point and photograph a target. The point, that target, is a landmark, but we do not give a description to the pilots. It is defined strictly by flying the correct course and a specific speed for a precise amount of time. Now, as you can see, it's not a from here to there trip. In fact, pilots have to first fly to several other points, and if you get any one of them wrong, you're going to have a cascade effect, and everything that follows is going to be a little off. Crews are not told what the target is. However, we do go so far as to say you will probably know it when you see it. But I also want to add that out of our 6 crews that participated last time, 3 of them failed to photograph the correct target, so they did not know it when they saw it, or they didn't arrive at the point. But in putting this together, I want to give a little background. We had certain limitations that we had to deal with. pilots participating in this, especially from the chapter here, are very, very familiar with our local area. So we had to deal with that. Pilots are also familiar with our local sectional chart, so that's one of the reasons we don't allow the use of a sectional chart, and in fact we provide a chart, which I'll talk about in a moment. We also had to keep this down to a reasonable time. We couldn't send people off on a 7-hour flight to photograph something in Upper Michigan. And we had to account for the fact that we have aircraft that span speed ranges from 80 miles an hour to 180 miles an hour. So now the first thing you're going to notice about this map is that it is similar to a sectional chart, and that's because it was created by overlaying this map on a sectional chart. So the lines of latitude and longitude are accurate and precise, and the elevation markings are correct, and some of the essential landmarks are accurate. And then there are other places on the map where it is wildly inaccurate. For example, if you find yourself over that lake in the upper left corner, you are definitely lost, because there is no lake there. We wanted to do this because in the early days of navigation, maps were not necessarily all that good. And in fact, pilots flying in the early days of air transport or flying wartime missions had very little to work with. During the first part of World War II, when the British and the French were still on the continent before they had gotten kicked off at Dunkirk, British pilots went around grabbing every Michelin map they could find, because that's about all they had to work with. And considering that their bases were moved rapidly as the Nazis advanced, oftentimes they would take off, fly their mission, and they'd come back and discover that the base had moved and they had to find a new one. So we wanted to sort of echo a little bit of that with a map that doesn't provide a lot of help to you. For the mission challenge, we wanted to create a kind of a sense of the unknown on this. So as you're flying this, you might look out the window and know that it's Slinger over there, but you're not going to know whether you're supposed to be over Slinger or to the left of it or to the right of it, because it's not on your course. So that means that you really have to get it right when it comes to the pilotage. Now, we have two courses that we fly. We fly a blue route and a red route. I'll be up there in the Spitfire, and that's for aircraft that are 140 miles an hour plus, and the red route is for aircraft that are less than 140 miles an hour. So if you look at the map, you can see the red route to the south here, and the blue route went to the north. The blue route's a little bit longer, so the guys going out and flying the blue route in a Bonanza will take about the same amount of time to fly that route as somebody flying the red route in a light sport. The first leg of this flight, grab my pointer. The first leg of the mission starts off at West Bend Airport, and it goes to our first point, which we named Impossible Turn Point. The idea being that if your engine fails at that point, it is impossible to turn around and go back to the airport. The impossible turn point is defined only by time and distance. There is no landmark for it. There's no pilotage to that point. You will be given that information as part of the briefing, which we'll get to in a little bit. So you can only get to impossible turn point by calculating your true course. And then, of course, and true course, as we know, is related to the lines of latitude and longitude on the globe. Then you have to apply the magnetic variation, which you can see we do have shown on the chart. It's going to look just like it does in a sectional. That'll give you your magnetic course, and then you have to apply your wind correction angle, which we'll get to when we talk about the E6B in a little bit. Once you apply that wind correction angle, you know where to point the airplane in order to fly that course, and then you have to calculate the distance, and you have to know your true airspeed. And I can't emphasize true airspeed enough. If you're going to fly the Navigation Mission Challenge, you definitely want to know what your aircraft's true airspeed is. I know I have a tendency to set my power settings according to whatever performance or fuel consumption I want to target, and then I'll take whatever airspeed I get. But in this challenge, you're going to want to know exactly how many miles per hour you are going through the air. So if you're going to participate, it might be worthwhile going out and doing a little testing. And talk to Don, because he's got, and I didn't bring it tonight, but he's got a link to a nifty little app that you can use. You can go up in the air with a GPS, you fly 3 different directions, you write down the GPS ground speed for those 3 directions, and this app will come up and tell you what your true airspeed is. And that'll give you an edge in this challenge. Now, one more thing of note for this first leg: when you fly Dead Reckoning, obviously we use other techniques to test ourselves. If we're going on a long trip and this is what we're using, you're going to be up there with your E6B, or we used to be anyway, and we'd say check our times between checkpoints, and we'd know how far we went and how long it took, and we'd be able to figure out what we're getting for a ground speed. Now, of course, that's all coming up with ForeFlight. But for the Navigation Mission Challenge, we do have on leg number 1 Checkpoint Charlie. Checkpoint Charlie is a ground reference point. It's a set of power lines. And you have the option as a participant to measure the distance from your starting point to Checkpoint Charlie, and then get out your pocket version of the E6B and calculate your actual ground speed. Maybe you're doing better than you calculated. Maybe the winds aloft forecast isn't what we thought it was. And by the way, on the day of the Navigation Mission Challenge, we will be sending aloft a weather reconnaissance flight. Captain Paul Lupton has agreed to go up and actually fly those 3 legs and run that little app and tell us what our winds aloft actually are. Which is very helpful, because our altitudes for the Navigation Challenge are usually below 2,500 feet, and as we all know, with winds aloft, they don't do a forecast for anything that's less than 1,500 feet above the surface. So, Checkpoint Charlie is there on the first leg. From the first leg, then you go to Impossible Turn Point, then you make a sharp turn, and you fly to the next point, which is Left Turn Point. And you'll notice on both the blue and the red routes, we have the same, almost exactly the same, well, we have exactly the same names for these checkpoints. At Left Turn Point, you, let me see, you make a left turn. And that'll take you up to the next point, which is called What's a Point. At What's a Point, we actually have a ground reference point. It's second base on a baseball diamond. You have to fly over second base, and you notice the little T up there. That is a required time recording point. You have to record your time, you have to find it, and you have to record your time. And your judge on board will verify the time. That's why we have a judge on board. Also to make sure that you're not using any kind of electronic navigation. But frankly, I'm not sure how electronic navigation would help you with this. Okay, from What's a Point, you go to the initial point. Now, in World War II bombing missions, formations of bombers they didn't fly to the target, they flew to an initial point. And because that allowed them to tighten up, form up, and fly a straight line from the initial point to the target. And usually, during that process, control of the lead aircraft was turned over to the bombardier, who had his Norden bomb sight linked to the autopilot. At that point also, they made very few corrections on the bomb run, which meant that the flak batteries on the ground had a field day, because now they were holding altitude and they were not making course changes, and the flak batteries could really zero in on them. And it got so bad that in that stretch that enemy fighters usually didn't bother trying to attack the bombers because they were afraid of being shot down by their own flak. Not a pleasant ride. From the initial point, you make your target run. Over the target, you take your photo and you record your time. You can't relax, however, at that point, because you also then have to begin the next leg, which will take you to the rendezvous point, which is a ground reference point. You will be provided with information as to what you're supposed to go over. In this case, you can see there's two symbols for mining, and we have a small body of water. So you're looking for, I don't know, a quarry or a couple of quarries and a pond. From the rendezvous point, you make your descent to pattern altitude, you return to the airport. Now, each crew that starts off on this thing, we wanted to make sure that the crews had a good start. If you're taking off and you're climbing at climb speed and you're turning, it's going to affect your time. So we organized these departure procedures that are part of the sheets that you have in front of you. If you look at those, you'll see that for each of the runways here at West Bend, we will have the crews fly a certain departure procedure. Just using runway 31 as an example, the procedure is pretty simple. You climb straight ahead to 2,300 MSL, then you begin a left turn, basically a racetrack type pattern. Continue climbing to your assigned altitude, and oh, by the way, you do have an assigned altitude for your navigation mission. And you are required to stay within 100 feet of it throughout the mission. And the judges will keep an eye on your altitude. If they ding you on your altitude, it will affect your final score. Departure procedure, you make a left turn, you track back, racetrack pattern, and that allows you to make another turn to cross over the intersection of the two runways and hit your stopwatch and start timing. And at that point, you should be at your assigned altitude and you should be on your course. And you'll know what your course is, of course, once we've done the briefing and you figure out leg number 1. So we have a departure procedure set up for each one of these. The other advantage, the obvious advantage, is that then you can accurately time from your first point to impossible turn point. Otherwise, you'd be kind of guessing based on climbing and turning and so on, and trying to line up with your course. So over that intersection of the runway, you start your timer. The other advantage is it gets you above pattern altitude so that any aircraft that are coming in or returning from the mission, it's not a conflict. And that's why we have the departure and arrival procedures. All right. Another important element to account for, and if you're getting a hint here that seconds count, they do. The lead crew from last fall's mission was within 131 seconds of the estimated time they predicted it would take to fly this route. And they successfully photographed the target. The runner-up was 16 seconds behind them. So seconds do count. So when you're out there and you're flying to impossible turn point and then you have to make a sharp turn to get on your next leg to go to left turn point, how are you going to do it? You're going to have to think about how you're going to handle that, because coming in on the inbound course, when you're going to know you're at this point when the clock tells you you're at that point. But at that point, you're also supposed to be timing and going that way. So you can do whatever you want here. If you're aerobatic enough and you can hold it within 100 feet, you could do an Immelman. However, we have also provided a suggestion, a turn that'll take you 128 seconds. And the gist of it is, on your inbound course, you get to your point, you immediately start timing, and you make a turn to 90 degrees, a 90-degree angle, 90 degrees to your outbound. Not 90 degrees to the inbound, 90 degrees to the outbound. So the outbound is 340 here, turn to 070. And you've started timing as soon as you hit your point here. You count off 19 seconds. You go for 19 seconds, and then you start a standard rate turn. You fly 270 degrees of standard rate turn, and you roll out on your course. And you count off another 19 seconds, and you'll be over that point. I've done the math on this. It actually works. It works for any airspeed, provided you do a standard rate turn. Now, this is also a no-wind condition. So we've all done turns about a point, so you know how the wind's going to affect a circle type turn, and you have to adjust accordingly. Another little hint here is when you reach this point, which has no definition as far as ground reference, you might want to look down and see if there's a barn or something there that you can keep track of, so that when you roll out on your next course, you can start timing when you get over that point and you can fly to your next leg. Just a suggestion, but again, I want to emphasize that seconds count in this. This is the navigation log. And this is where we're going to pick up the E6B. I don't want to keep this going too much longer. Show of hands, do you want to do more detail or just skim through this? Skim through? Skim through, okay. Well, in this navigation log that everybody's provided, each leg is laid out. And to give you the fast forward version of what we were going to do tonight, I will tell you that the first leg is the only leg during the briefing and during the planning that the crews actually have to get out a plotter and measure a true course and measure distance. For the rest of the legs, the true course you can see is provided and the distance is provided. I mean, we're all pilots here, we've all done it before. I wanted to make everybody do it once on this, but there's no point in sitting here for half an hour measuring true courses. Measuring out the true course on this first leg, of course, the distance that you would have measured out tonight in our little experiment would have been 22.5 miles. There is a catch here, and that is that the plotters that you have on the table are set up for sectional and whack charts, as you know. The chart that you have on the table is not. And that's why there's a scale running down the side of the chart. So if you just use the plotter to measure this course, you're going to be way off. Okay, 22.5 miles. Next thing we got to do is determine the true course of leg number 1. And of course that again is where we'd use the plotter. You could do it on the chart if you want to right now, but I'm going to tell you that it's 316 degrees. So our true course is 316 degrees. Looking at the chart, how do we get from true course to magnetic course? Anybody?
TV makes dull company.
I didn't hear it.
TV makes dull company.
What is that?
True variation, magnetic, deviation.
Okay, I had east is least and west is best. All right. East is least and west is best. If you look at the map, you'll see the dashed line. We have 3 degrees of magnetic variation. And by the way, another good reason to live in Wisconsin, because I grew up my whole life here. It was 0 when I first started flying. So we're up to 3 now. 3 degrees of magnetic variation. What do we do with those 3 degrees? Add them. It's 3 degrees west, east is least, west is best, add it to. So from our true course of 316, we now have a magnetic course of 319. From there we got to get to our heading. This is where winds aloft comes in, and this is where I'm actually going to make you do it. Get out the plotter or the E6B that you have on the table. Flip to the back side. On the back side, that's where we calculate wind correction angle. I'm going to give you winds aloft of 010 at 12. 010 at 12. And our airspeed, by the way, our true airspeed is 145. Okay, 010 at 12. First question, 010, what is that? True or magnetic? It's true. Okay, so that's going to affect things a little bit. And 12, what is that? Knots or miles per hour? It's knots. Okay, we're doing our calculations in miles per hour, so flip to the other side.
You're flying a Cherokee.
Flip to the other side of the E6B, and somebody quick convert those 12 knots to, or those 12 knots to miles per hour.
Yeah, nautical miles, so there. Nautical is 10.
Put the 12 under nautical and read the statute under 13.8. Okay, we're going to call it 14. Yeah, it's 100. It's 138. 13.8. All right, we're going to call it 14. So our winds aloft are, it was 010 true at 12 knots. What are they in magnetic at 013 magnetic and 14 miles per hour? Okay, now on the back side, line up 013 under the notch in the top of your E6B. I should have put one up here. I'm sorry. And then take a pencil and from the center point of your E6B, count up 14 units, 14 miles per hour, and make a dot. Yeah, make a pencil dot on your 14. Okay, I'm going to hold this up here. You take the center dot and you put it on one of these curved lines. You take 013. We're going to have to do this again. 013 and put it under the notch up at the top. And now you mark your wind speed with a little pencil dot 14 units up from your center point. Anybody getting it? Who needs a pencil?
He needs a pencil.
Here you go.
Well, it used to be.
Okay, once you've made your mark, okay, now we're going to roll to our heading, which was, what did I say, 319? You're going to move this slider until your pencil mark sits on 145 miles per hour, which is your true airspeed. Okay. It's a little off to the right here. And now your center dot is down a little farther, which makes sense because you've got a headwind. And I read mine as 135. Everybody good on that? I think we need some practice on this one. Okay. Well, I'm not going to take up much more of your time here doing that, but trust me, the number that we're looking for is 135. And this little dot now is over to the right by 4 degrees. So we have to make a right adjustment to our magnetic course in order to get our heading. 4 degrees to the right. Our magnetic course was 319. Our heading is 323. Okay. So what we've just done to review, our distance is 22.5. Our true course was 316. Our magnetic course was 319. And our heading is 323. That should keep us on that line from West Bend Airport to Impossible Turn Point. So we have gotten to a point where we have a heading of 323, we have a ground speed of 138. So what is our estimated time en route for 22.5 miles? Front side, E6B. Set your airspeed with the big pointy thing at 138. Find 22.5 miles, and right under that you'll see the time. Somebody shout it out. Okay, anybody got it yet? 10 minutes. 10 minutes, that is correct. 10 minutes en route, so 10 minutes of flying on that heading at your assigned altitude at your correct true airspeed with a ground speed of 138 will put you directly over impossible turn point. And at that point, you make your turn and you go on to the next one. In the briefing that we do for the mission challenge, we sit everybody down, we go through, we provide enough time to fill out this entire log. Now here's what has to be filled out for this. 10 minutes here means that right here is where we put our start time as we pass over the runway intersection. And my recommendation is to use a cell phone with a nice stopwatch on it and just hit it when you go over. Your start time is 0000. Okay, your arrival time at impossible turn point then is 10 minutes. And in this little box here, I personally am going to put 2 minutes and 8 seconds to allow me to do that turn. That'll put me right back over impossible turn point. So I account for that 2 minutes and 8 seconds here, which means that I'm going to arrive at, depart impossible turn point at 10 minutes, or 12 minutes and 8 seconds. And then I'm going to take the time here, let's call it 8 minutes. I'm going to add that and I'm going to arrive at left turn point at 20 minutes and 8 seconds. I'm going to execute another 128 second turn, so I'll account for that in here and on down the line. You fill this out entirely. It gets checked by the squadron commander before you depart. And when you fly this route, you will then, over several points, required points, you'll have your estimated time over point, and over here you write down the actual time over certain points. There will be 3 of them this time. We had 2 last time. We'll have 3 of them this time. You write down your actual time here. Now you may have estimated that you're going to arrive at what's a point at 27 minutes and 42 seconds. And your actual time over what's a point, over second base, was 29 minutes and 42 seconds. So you were 120 seconds off the mark. Don't be discouraged. Keep on flying. You know, you might want to adjust. You may be able to adjust. But that's how we do some of the scoring for this. Okay, so moving on. Success on this thing is 4 things. Find and photograph the target, your estimated time versus your actual time, and that's the 2 boxes I just talked to you about. Maintain your assigned altitude within 100 feet. Return to base. If you don't, you won't qualify. And whoever has the score that's most efficient will be designated the lead crew. The rules, just to run through them real quickly. Participating crews must obey all pertinent FARs. So if you're going to go on a cross-country trip, not only should you be doing these calculations, but you should be doing a fuel calculation. You should also be meeting your VFR fuel requirements. Each crew must consist of a pilot, co-pilot, and judge, except for 2 passenger aircraft, then it's a pilot and a judge. Pilot and co-pilot, very handy, because pilots should be up there focusing on holding that heading, holding that altitude, and controlling that airspeed. And the co-pilot is the guy who's juggling with the timers and writing down times and keeping the logs and helping to watch for traffic, of course, and so on and so forth. The judge, I'll get to that in a minute. Crews register before departure, because then we can try to sequence the departures. We'll try to get the faster aircraft out first so nobody catches up with anybody. And we also try to alternate red, blue, red, blue. So there's plenty of spacing. Crews have to attend the pilot briefing. That's at 0900 on May 13th. Except in an emergency, no electronics. Except in an emergency, no published charts. Approved timing devices are wristwatches, clocks, cell phone stopwatches, any kind of stopwatch. Smartphone timing apps are fine. The times that I've flown and tested these routes, I've used my cell phone with a starting point of 0, and it's pretty cool the way it works. Operation Standard Communication Equipment is approved. Crews shall adhere to the published departure and arrival procedures. It's not optional. The published procedure that we give you for departing, we want you to follow that just not only for safety, but it's also going to give you an edge in getting this thing started. You must hold your assigned altitude within 100 feet, and you will be assigned an altitude. And it might be 2,450 feet. Or it might be 2,300, or it might be 2,350. I don't know if we'll get any odder than that, but crews must call out and judges must confirm the recording of the required time points. You may not adjust your estimated flight times that you wrote down on your flight log before departure. That flight log is completed before departure, and we'll be checking for whiteout. So. You may, however, adjust your speed if you determine that it's going to be beneficial to you. You may adjust your heading if you feel that your heading was not calculated correctly or that you're not seeing something you didn't anticipate. You may not engage in maneuvers such as circling or holding to improve your time accuracy.
See, it doesn't say hovering.
Our winner last time was the helicopter.
Come on, we played it fair.
And upon landing, the flight logs get turned over to the judge. And then the staff here will determine the lead crew.
So full flaps is okay then, huh?
Say again?
Full flaps.
Whatever you want to do. Okay, reviewing again on Saturday, May 13th. We will open the hangar up at 7 in the morning. Coffee and donuts. Somebody else is going to have to make the coffee. I'll bring the donuts. I don't know how to make coffee. Briefing is at 0900. Your briefers will be Major Blender, Squadron Commander, and his trusty Group Intelligence Officer, Major Error. Your flight crews I've already described. Pilot does the flying, co-pilot does everything else. And for anybody who's interested, this is last year's course that I've been showing you tonight. That is not what we will be flying on May 13th. So this map and stuff that you've got, you can take it if you want to, but it's not going to help you. But that is the course laid over a sectional chart. And this is the target for Blue Flight. It was the grandstands at Road America. And this is the target for Red Flight, which is that radar dome that's out northwest of Hartford Airport. And like I say, 3 out of 6 managed to take a picture. So one other thing you're going to have to consider too, by the way, is as you are approaching the target and your co-pilot calls out, 20 seconds to target, 30 seconds to target, whatever, you might be looking ahead to figure out what that target is. And as I said, if you are correct in your calculations, you should be able to tell what we want you to take a picture of. We're not out there having you take a picture of a random tree. But then you're also going to have to determine if your time is a little short or a little long, and that's the target. Do you wait until you hit the time to take your photograph, or do you take a picture of what you think the target is? That is up to you. And that is why we need pilots in aircraft and not drones. You need people making decisions. Any questions? Yes, sir.
You actually have to have a picture. You can't just name an object.
Correct. You have to take a photograph, so bring along your cell phone with a camera or any kind of digital camera so that when we get back here, we don't have to send the film over to intelligence and have it processed. Yes?
Who's usually in charge of taking the picture, the pilot or?
That's up to the crew. You may want to have your co-pilot do the photography, But you're going to have to coordinate it a little bit because, for example, in a low-wing aircraft, you might have to tip it over on its side to get a decent picture. And bear in mind that when you pass over that target, you are now supposed to be headed on a new course. And you're not done timing things yet. You still have to maintain your accuracy all the way to the end. Other questions? I hope you all participate. We had 6 aircraft last time. We probably would have had 10, except that we had to do a weather delay. We had to postpone 1 week, and we lost 4 crews because of it. I'm hoping we have some crews coming in from outside the chapter. But in any case, whether we have 1 or a dozen, we'll be here, and we're going to have some fun. Oh, I have one other request. I'll bring the donuts for the morning briefing, but if last time is any indication, a lot of the crews didn't finish doing the calculating until almost 10:30 or 11 o'clock. And then we started departing. So we're going to be here through the lunch hour. So if anybody wants to get kind of creative and put together a crew for bratwurst barbecue lunch, that might be a neat idea. Whatever you want to do. But I think we're going to be here into the early afternoon. Thank you very much.